Follow after that.
Good morning, Adenike.
Good morning. Adenike Oyetunde is joining us today and hopefully subsequently on Freshly Pressed 981. You can find her at Adenike Oyetunde on Twitter. And of course, you know him. He's no stranger, needs no introduction. Cheta Nwaeze is here at Chexter on
Good
Twitter.
Morning. Good
Morning. And of course, as well, you know Tunde Okufi at Big Coast on Twitter.
Morning, Lagos.
Good morning. Now, we know you because you send us messages on WhatsApp, Twitter, and also watch online. But if you'd like to join the conversation this morning or you're just joining us for the first time, please feel very free. The numbers to send that message to
on WhatsApp is 0809-444-0981. That is our WhatsApp number, 0809-444-0981. You can send it through Twitter. Make sure you attach this hashtag to your messages. Hashtag is freshly pressed 981. And we're streaming live on YouTube. You can use the live chat option as well.
That's right. Okay, let's go very quickly to our first story. And Adenike, throwing you into the deep end, I'm going to you first. Okay. All right, the first one here is a story for today. Anambra procures land to build children's prison. Actually, let me let you off for this first one. Cheta, I'll come to you for the first story. Anambra procures land to build children's prison. Now, according to reports, we have here that the state government has procured a piece of land in Umunzi, Orumba South local government area of the state for the construction of children's prisons. They've talked about the fact that currently about 523 children are presently in adult prisons. Can you please take us through the story?
They're building they've gotten land in Umunzi and they want to build a prison. That's the long and short of the story. But for me, it's a classic example of how we ignore the problems and create new ones in the process. So you have 523 children in adult prisons. Why are they there? Children, by definition, are minors.
Yes.
You shouldn't be talking of prisons. You should be talking of remand homes
or correctional facilities.
Not same papa bonds of them.
Yeah, okay.
More importantly, is the fact that you should, I think, given what we're facing in the country at the moment, with rising insecurity and all that, you should actually be talking of building skill acquisition centers, proper skill acquisition centers.
Okay.
Not building places in. By the way, Umunze is just down the road from Umuchu. This which is close to Uga. This is a very densely populated area. You want to now build, and then we know how slack we can get with security and such. There's a prison break from there. You release people that you've been training for all sorts of nefarious activities into a densely populated area. It doesn't work in my view. Now, Anambra State recorded the highest labor force population in the southeast in the last unemployment report.
Okay.
And unemployment levels there are 17.5%, and unemployment is 17.6%. That's something that's a more constructive use of this thing will be skill acquisition center. Get people to learn something so that they will be useful to society, especially at that age where their minds can still be molded.
Well, I have to ask a question here, Cheta, because let me clarify a statement from a representative of the state, Missouri, who said that the correctional facility will proper place for rehabilitating minors. So do you think perhaps it's the language that is being used in terms of referring to it as a prison? Because at the end of the day, it is recognized that they're minors. They know that they've committed a crime, but they're still going to rehabilitate them.
The Kirikiri is also, if we want to use that language, if we want to be pedantic, Kirikiri is a rehabilitation center as well. Do you think that people that go in there come out rehabilitated?
But perhaps we should then have a separate conversation about what happens in our prisons as a whole. So not just with regards to Anambra, but perhaps we should start looking at the fact that when prisoners when they're convicted and they go into prison, they're not rehabilitated. They're just dumped somewhere and they come out and they reoffend.
Well, for children younger than 18, there are studies that prove it. They go into these facilities and come out more of a threat to society. And this is not just Nigeria, the world over.
Okay.
So what we should be doing is how to educate and equip them with skills to make them useful in society, not bend their life at the age of 12.
But Cheta, I mean, looking at this particular situation, would your exchange for you if you realize that some of these children from some of these minors are being transferred from adult prisons where they were being held?
It still doesn't change, and there's a case study in Nigeria, Skolombo in Calabar.
Based on the influence that they've gathered over time.
Again, case study, read up on Skolombo in Calabar. It's a very similar dynamic. Put children with bad adult influences,
Yeah.
and then brought them out, blah blah. Those children were already gone.
They're gone. Okay, thank you very much. Tunde, I know you want to say something. Okay, all right, let's move on to our next story. Thank you, because of our time. So, Adenike, I'll come to you for this. Fashola finally releases list of corrupt contractors. For those who remember, we actually took the story on here where SERAP, that's Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, had petitioned the Minister of Power, Works and Housing a number of times to release under the Freedom of Information Act list of corrupt contractors. Well, he has released one name. Can you take us through this story, please?
You see this and you wonder, so why now? Why is he mentioning the names? And if he decides to mention the organization, how about you talk about the people behind the organization? Because it's necessary for us to know the persons who took the contract.
Yeah.
Because corporate organizations work only through individuals.
They are not faceless.
Exactly. No company works without directors, and directors are the ones that do the day-to-day, running and management of the company. Now, Fashola has just mentioned Power Technologies Limited, an Abuja-based company, and that they were awarded a contract for supply installation to test blah 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 blah. Mentions
almost
the amount.
80 million naira.
Exactly. And the question is, why is he mentioning this particular name now? Serap had gone to the court and had filed a suit to say you cannot indiscriminately hold back information. If you decide to release the name of the organization, we want every other organization that is here, and we also want details of what happened, what contract was given, when was it given. In this particular instance, he's claiming that they had not even done the job that they had been contracted to doing. And it just leaves us hanging, because in 2011, when Jonathan, then president, signed the FOI bill, everybody was excited. Everybody did. Now, from Lagos State, when he was the governor then, to becoming the Minister of Works and Housing, what has happened with the FOI bill in this particular regard? If Serap decides that we're no longer pursuing, how many Nigerians, how many organizations will come up and say, you know what, Serap has tried, Serap has run out of whatever it is that he has. We want more information.
Isn't it interesting, Adenike? I don't know if you did. I tried to Google, or I tried to search for Power Technologies Limited. For such an organization like that, there's no information. I don't know if you found any information.
Shadow.
I'm quite surprised. If you're awarding a contract of up to almost 80 million naira, I would assume that it's a big organization. We can track them online.
I'm glad that Serap is doing this. And I'm glad that what Serap is doing and insisting is asking that the court mandates the ministry to open its books. We need to see your books. We need to know the people behind these organizations. A lot of these companies are shadow companies. A lot of these companies are companies owned by people who work in government. Unfortunately, because nobody is coming out there, no evidence is in court, nobody is holding these particular persons to saying that this is what it is that you've done for so long and we want accountability. Fashola is now understanding that it is not business as usual. We don't know if he's going to continue in this capacity as a minister when the new cabinet comes on board. Imagine that he doesn't continue. Does that mean that we're going to start the process all over again? It just raises a lot of questions. I'm particularly not excited that one name has just been thrown. It's just like a bajen to me. Just let me have my peace of mind. But unfortunately, he can't have that peace of mind until more is revealed.
Thank you very much.
One company out of about 100 that got the contracts initially. Let's just keep that in mind.
Thank you. Well, if you're listening and you know anything about Power Technologies, it would be lovely to get a link or information about them. All right, Tunde, let me come to you for this story. The Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority, NSIA, who are the manager of Nigeria Sovereign Wealth Fund, have indicated that it's their preparedness to deploy more capital towards developing infrastructure in the country. Good news. When you look at the detail of this story, and your okay does not sound convincing, but maybe I'd allow you to go through this.
Maybe it's in the preparedness, but I mean, it would seem so, at least. I mean, further down in one of the stories, the federal government mentions voting 169 billion for infrastructure projects, and if you look at the income that NSIA has made in the present year, that's probably maybe you could say 20% or close to 20% of that. So it's not bad. So for some background, the NSIA was founded in 2011, and it was meant to replace the excess crude account. What happens is there's always a difference between the budgeted amount that's for crude and the actual, sometimes it's negative, but when it's positive, that money goes somewhere. In the past, I'd gone to the excess crude account, and we used it generally to fund deficits in the budget and other things. But the excess crude account came into all sorts of. There had always been questions around it because, as with many things, there's little transparency as to how it's spent and what it's spent on. So the NSIA was supposed to do two things: potentially bring more transparency, I say potentially, and then also to invest. Instead of the money just sitting down in an account that's then dipped into, it's invested as a fund to generate income as well. And it's split into three things. It's split into a stabilization fund, which is what the excess crude account did exclusively, which is if there's shortfalls in budget, put it towards that. There's also a fund called the Future Generation Fund. So it's supposed to supposedly focus on projects for the next generation. So there's hope for Nigeria. And everyone don't check out to Canada. The NSIA is here to save.
Yeah.
And then there's a Nigerian Infrastructure Fund. And that's what the story focuses on. The fund is split into three things, right? So only a third at best, if it's split equally, of that fund can be put towards infrastructure. Now, just to pick out some of the numbers, it has a total capitalization of 1.5 billion. So we've invested $1.5 billion in this. That's the value of the fund, and the fund then invests in different securities. As the rest of us would, to earn money.
Yeah.
In this year, they've made 44.34 billion naira as their total income and earning, but that has to do with foreign exchange fluctuations, so gains. You know how you can end up with more naira because the naira has devalued, right? So when they correct that and adjust that, they've made 26.29 billion, which is not bad, and it can go towards some
infrastructure development
projects.
All right. Thank you very much. You'll probably tie into another story we're taking on later about roads that are going to be repaired. But let's talk about the police arresting 6 people with truckload of poisonous ponmo, aka cowhide. Premium Times has this story. Adenike, let me come to you for this. We're not laughing. It's just well, maybe before we take this story, let's hear reactions from our listeners.
All right. So on WhatsApp, we have this one first from MI from Akoka. It said maybe it's the government or lazy journalism, but better use of semantics. It should be Juvenile Correction Center. We do not run programs that rehabilitate incarcerated kids. So will the purpose be achieved anyways? A question hanging in the air. Emmanuel from Ikeja said, I heard the first story and my first thought was a line from Lucky Dube's song. They won't build no schools anymore. All the buildings will be prisons. Perhaps the story has been sensationally captioned. I think so too. But prisons for children, as Cheta analyzed, in a community with a relatively high unemployment rate is counterproductive.
All right, thank you very much. So let's go back to the ponmo story. Adenike, Premium Times has said that they have arrested 6 suspects in the possession of poisonous cow skin, aka ponmo.
Yes. So according to the Premium Times, I feel like I'm excited about one thing in particular: the fact that the arrest actually happened on the tip of giving to the police.
Yeah.
So whether or not it was in connivance, whether or not somebody was, bitter about the business transaction, that doesn't matter. What matters most is that information was provided to the police, and then they acted on it, and voila, 6 trucks filled with poisonous ponmo. I'm heartbroken because I use ponmo.
It's a national.
National treasure.
It's a waste of leather that we can export.
Please.
Cheta.
So there's the economic side, but let's not go to that yet.
Exactly. Please, let's just
Well, I have a question.
Yes.
Why or what would be the motivation for having poisonous? I don't understand. Why would people want to sell poisonous food?
What I looked for in that particular report was to ensure who actually confirmed that these ponmo, were poisonous. And
ponmo is dead skin. They probably it's probably the treatment. They probably don't know that. They don't even know. What has happened is that what's the booty something whatever that's.
Okay.
Sorry, it's unscrupulous business practice. We don't produce enough ponmo, so we import it. Now, in the importation, to preserve it, they sometimes and oftentimes use chemicals that are harmful to human beings. That's the truth. That's why it's poisonous ponmo. Not like someone spilled anything. The process of making ponmo is just soaking leather, soaking hide that we like. Cheta said we can use to make shoes or export to Italy. We do some of that now to make bags and come back as expensive things. You just soak it in water. That's the process of making ponmo until it's rot. If you see them make ponmo, you will not eat it. But the problem is we don't make enough ponmo, so we import it. The sad thing is that this story keeps coming back in a cycle.
Yes.
It's not the first
Not
time.
just
In
for this
2014,
particular.
I remember when then Minister of Agriculture was there. That was
Yeah.
one thing that came up again. This whole poisonous ponmo,
Yeah.
and nobody talked about how do we get ponmo in the first
Yeah,
instance.
yeah.
Like Tunde was saying, what do we? How many people know that their chemicals actually used to preserve these things? And then what happens when you even get the ponmo? How do people care for it? How do people eat it? That's
Yeah.
why it follows the school of thought about like what Cheta is saying, that you know what, let's just probably start considering not consuming it.
Yes,
Since
all
we
right.
cannot ascertain.
There's one person in the studio who is considering not consuming it at least. All right, let's move on to the next story.
All right, so I'll take quick messages before we proceed. Now, from Shegun of Freda here says, so is Fashola saying it's only one company that defaulted? I'm wondering what requirements for waiver this particular company did not meet. If there's a longer list, I can bet money will go through people's hands to have the company's names taken off the list. Corruption everywhere. As Shegun says, Fashola's second name should be... no, can't take this one, sorry. Yinko says, good morning, guys. Who are the people behind SARP? They should not be faceless as well. They are not. They're very vocal about the involvement. Are they the only ones that have local standing? Why can't other individuals and organizations also challenge the government? Yinko asks. Now, Biggie from K2 sent in this one.
He says, the thing about the ponmo cowhide I love is that the preservation of it is what makes it poisonous. And I like, wow, okay.
Wow,
Keep it in.
interesting. From the Vanguard newspaper, let's move on very quickly. Adenike, I'll come to you for the analysis on this story. Traffic law violation. Now, the headline is, I consider it mischievous because it just names Onnoghen as a clickbait.
Yes.
It says Onnoghen, but this time not the Chief Justice, the former Chief Justice of Nigeria, but Thomas Onnoghen, an individual, and 39 others forfeit vehicles to the Lagos State government. They said the offense basically was driving against traffic one way. Your thoughts?
I'm losing words. I'm wondering why we feel like the government has to be on our tails to tell us what to do when it comes to driving. Every person who drives, whether it is you're being driven or you are a passenger or you own the car, every single time we see cars, we see commercial vehicles, we see private cars, and even the so-called automobiles, those big cars, driving against traffic and beating the traffic rule, facing one way, and you wonder what rush can you possibly be in that you're trying to endanger not just your life as a driver, but the life of the occupants. Now, interestingly enough, a lot of the passengers also do not, comment, because why? Everybody feels, hey, we're beating traffic, we're getting to where we're going. So when in 2017 was in the news that FRSC, I always mix it up.
Yes.
FRSC had come out to say, you know what? Not only is it that we're going to subject traffic law offenders to a mental evaluation or psychiatric testing, but we're going to ensure that, that they also pay for it. I thought, hey, it was going to do something, but as almost everything here, it's just news. The question is, how much implementation has happened? It came up again a few months ago in Abuja when they said 4,000 people or so were going to, be subjected to mental testing. I feel very strongly that almost everyone who is found guilty of traffic law offenses, especially the misdemeanor ones, should actually be subjected to some mental evaluation, because sometimes you begin to ask yourself, you can't be sane to do these things. And if you don't do these things, in your same mind, it means you're not supposed to be driving a vehicle. And also the occupants, my question to the FRSC now is, what happens? So I'm an occupant and then the driver does this thing. Does it also mean that I am, as the occupant or the passenger, would also be subjected to the mental evaluation or testing? But because we hear mental, everybody thinks, hey, and the bad connotation that has lived with mental health for such a long time. But it just literally means we're checking your brain to find out what exactly is precipitating your doing the wrong thing.
Exactly. I like the points you made, very valid ones, but I'm also wondering, shouldn't the government be held responsible for not ensuring that the traffic signs that should be very visible on all roads? The road markings are a problem. You find that when you're driving on major
I feel like
way,
you're just trying to give defaulters an excuse.
No, I'm not.
Because
not.
I
I'm
agree
not.
with
You know
you
why?
that
Yes, yeah.
Lagos, for instance, is not properly labeled. Let's be honest.
Of
you're
course.
using your GPS and you're one GPS. Where is this? Where is it? And
Exactly.
before you know,
And what lane should we follow?
I
and
get
all those
that.
things.
But the reality also is that even in societies where they seemingly properly labeled, people still flout the traffic laws. And when these things happen, what do? They take those offenders and make sure that they're penalized. So how should that differ from us how are we doing, what are we doing? We can't continue to say because it's not properly labeled. I have a problem where the one way, for instance, a lot of the streets, you don't see the signage. I have fallen victim to that. And before you know, boom, officials just come and I want you, okay, but there's no signage. But you can't continue to beg your way out. They'll probably, take care and do this. But we don't know all those things that happen on the spot. What happens? So I feel like the government has its own work, responsibility, but a larger chunk of it is in motorists. A larger chunk of it, and I'm emphasizing, are the passengers in these vehicles. Official cars, private cars, commercial buses. Valentine, I was coming here and the guy faced one way.
Yes.
So it's not just one way for me as a person. It's also tail light. I don't think a lot of Nigerians understand that the woman that made the car knows the purpose of the tail light offenses. What do we do about that? It also talks about not using your pointer or trafficator, as we like to call it.
Turn indicator.
Exactly. So these are things that we need to talk about and address seriously.
Thank you very much, Adenike. Let's move on very quickly to the next story from New Telegraph. Cheta, this story reads, fresh electricity tariff hike on the way. As if the fact that we haven't been metered is not bad enough. Having this story come to us to indicate that they might increase or they would soon increase the price of electricity. But then it seems to be a problem that the discos, gencos have been complaining about a long time ago regarding the multi-year tariff order and the fact that the metering system is really a problem that hasn't been taken care of so far. Your thoughts on this, please?
The metering problem is something that hasn't been taken care of because many of the discos are playing games with regards to estimated billing, so they make it difficult for you to get meters. Having said that, we do have to increase tariffs on electricity. Let's not beat around the bush. This so-called cheap electricity thing is, we're not getting the electricity. The people cannot invest because they're not sure. You can't tell people to come and put money in your kidney and invest and then not make profits. It doesn't work anywhere. Let me tell a quick story. In December of last year, my power in my area got really bad. As I'm talking of in the first 2 weeks of December, or first 3 weeks, we didn't have maybe up to 2 hours of light thereabouts. So now I have solar panels, I have an inverter, I have big gen, I have small gen. Yet, because of Madam's freezer, of course, the big gen has to come on at some point, small gen has to come on at some point. You have to ration it with the inverter and solar so that things will get cold. And I was taking note of my expenses during the period, and I found that I was spending an average of 2,200 a day, which, based on my calculation, will project to 66,000 a month.
Wow.
Now, I was not this was me that was rationing between solar and inverter. My neighbors who were spending much more, I can only begin to imagine what they were spending. Based on the MITO projections, you will not spend if we have 24 hours and we're paying this MITO, at least as of when the first report was released. You shouldn't spend you should spend about between 50 and 60,000 per month. I know that a lot of people can't afford it in this country. Sad. But we need that efficiency first, and then we can build up from there. Because the amounts that people spend on power is ridiculous, does not even begin to describe it. A friend of mine, his company generator, they had to replace it. And as they were getting a new one, he took a picture and he tweeted, said, "Oh, our new employee." Because essentially what they spend on diesel is like what they spend on employees. So this place of work that they cannot afford to be down for 1 second. They spend on
we need your thoughts on this.
On power.
Cannot disclose.
It's ridiculous.
So it burdens the economy, the cost of doing business. However, what we pay for power is too little. It needs to go up, as Cheta has highlighted. But when we generate your calculations on how much you spend yourself, it shouldn't be a direct interpretation of what power should cost, because you remember this is shared infrastructure, and then generally the price comes down for all of us. So maybe a third of what you spend on power today, probably on generating your own power, is probably a fair reflection of what we should pay for metered power.
Yeah, right. Because they
But
spoke,
then,
they
but
spoke
then you
about
now take the associated cost of the noise pollution,
Yeah,
the
well,
headache
yeah,
that
all
it
that
gives
kind
you,
of-
all
yeah,
of that.
true,
Yes,
true.
but then again, they speak about the cost reflective tariff being something that should be reasonable enough to consider. But anyway, let's move on very quickly because we're running out of time. From Daily Times, we have this story. Daily Times newspaper carries this one: 63 years after trade by barter market still effective in Cross River states. They said in this market that opens just weekly or once a week on Saturday between 7 a.m. and noon every Saturday in a part of Akwa or Cross River. They said some people exchange 40 bells of yam for 4 liters of palm oil. It just makes me smile.
Mhm.
But looking at it as a reflection of our financial or trading system in Nigeria, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, I'd rather not look at it as a reflection of that. It's one of those interesting quirks that you find across the world, generally in different areas, not just trading. There's some places where you find the most interesting things, and I doubt would be unique anyway. Or this community probably be unique in trading by barter. So, but what comes to mind is it's an attraction, right?
Yeah.
So therefore it creates an opportunity for tourism, and as the story points out, the community people say that the market serves as an attraction
Yes.
for tourists. But they, however, do mention, of course, as with many things, as with generally almost all things, that it is in requirement of a facelift. It hasn't received much attention since its inception 63 years ago. It's almost like it's one of those places you can go where you're frozen in time, and you can go back to see how things were done in the past.
Pretty much the whole of Nigeria,
outside
of Lagos and
Africa is 50
Well,
years
in
behind the
this
rest of
case,
the world.
they don't have any good schools.
They don't have good
possible
schools
drinking water
and a bunch of other things. So there are a bunch of other things that
facilities.
can help. So it's good. And then it was a slave market at some point in time. So it's rich in history, and it's one of those things that we can probably amplify. And there are countries that make more than we do from crude. Several times more than we make from crude from tourism. But we need to get ourselves straight. Security needs to be right. We need to cherish what is ours and a bunch of other things. It's a long road there.
Thank you, Tunde. Moving on very quickly to Punch newspaper for the story. UTME, that's the University Tertiary Matriculation Examination. University Tertiary Matriculation Examination, speaking to 5 people jailed for examination fraud and 123 others that are facing trial. Cheta, please take us through the connotations in this story.
What connotations? Where is the producer? As in, I wonder how this story made freshly pressed. No, seriously. 1.8 million people wrote JAMB as per the JAMB registrar. So 5 have been arrested, 123. That's what 0.0000217%, and then we're making it into a national story. Come on.
Well, looking at the areas that these people were apprehended in the northern part of Nigeria, Zamfara and Kebbi states.
Maybe also the relevance is that what they recent talk about them using biometrics to pick out
please,
the
come
cost.
on.
Remember, we said we're in Africa, we're behind, so it's. I will come to another story that is quite interesting as to why it's there, but deal with the story.
See, 128 people exam fraud. It's only from the 5 from Zamfara and Kebbi that they talked about. They didn't talk about the origins of the remaining 123. Exam malpractice has been a problem in this country since. I wrote JAMB. I wrote JAMB 23 years ago now, and that time in Edo State there was this special center called Afuse. What we need to do in terms of bringing exam malpractice to 0, which is statistically impossible. This is as near 0 as you can get. 128 out of 1.8 million. So I would actually congratulate JAMB that they've done very well.
Maybe stories for jailing people. Oh, sorry, they face jail. Jail.
Please, we were talking about jail earlier.
This one second, guys. Thank you. NSIA on YouTube sent in this message. Says to get better power in Nigeria today, power must be decentralized. States should be producing their independent power, and every citizen should be metered. More messages here on WhatsApp.
All right, Lucky from Akerele says, whatever happened to all our ethical values and sense of moderative correction? We're now building prisons instead of rehabilitation centers for juvenile offenders. It's so glaringly obvious that we aren't going in the right direction in this country. The major people offending right now are the herdsmen, and we're planning to bribe them to hold gunfire when they should be publicly. Well, okay, we'll move on from this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Emmanuel from Ikeja says, very apt analysis, Adenike. With regards to traffic infractions from commercial transport workers, I also think the commuters are equally culpable. One shouldn't let someone endanger their lives so needlessly. And thanks to Frida. Frida sent in this one. It says, our government is always so quick to dish out punishment. I'm not condoning traffic offenses, but the government need to address the real issues. In a bid to avoid potholes, people will need to take one way, especially on smaller roads. Still does not make it right, Frida, but thank you for your message.
All right, thank you very much for your messages, and a special thanks to our analysts who came in this morning to help us, or who are here this morning to help us with the analysis of the stories. Thanks to Adenike Oyetunde on Twitter, Checkstar on Cheta on Twitter, and then of course Big Coofs on Twitter, Tunde Okufi. Thank you for all your messages as well on WhatsApp, on Twitter, and on YouTube. You can also check out this edition later on our YouTube channel. This is Smooth 98.1. We're coming back at 8:15 for the locker room with Tega. Stay tuned.